Hello and welcome to Stork'd, the podcast which explores the many ways people define and create family. This is Julia. Today I want to introduce you to my good friend and my former college housemate, Suman. Suman and I will talk about the very long journey into parenthood that he and his wife took. Their journey took them through the IVF process, a serious fibroid surgery, and deep consideration around adoption. They especially considered adoption in light of their heritage. Suman and his wife had a preference for an Indian baby if they were to adopt. I love talking to Suman in part because he is just so raw and honest with his opinions. He has his own perspective, and you're going to hear some of that today. The reason I wanted to share Suman's story is that when you go looking for fertility journeys, particularly, the paths to become parenting that involves often medical intervention or a long process of trying to get pregnant. So many of these stories focus on the person who is doing the heavy lifting in their own bodies, the person who is trying to get pregnant. Typically, there's one person who is bearing the weight or the burden of this, and the fertility journey really focuses on that individual. I think we're missing an important part of the story, which is the partner and the person who is sitting in support or witness to the complicated path, and who they themselves may not get their physical body involved very much, but certainly have emotions and perspective. And so I think talking to Suman is important because we get the partner perspective in a way that certain other stories don't share. His perspective is largely rooted in statistics and logic because he is in finance and it's sort of just how his brain works. But he also has some very real emotions to share about the path to watching his spouse go through this process and complicated emotions around when to stop and when to continue, etc. And I think it's a really important one for us all to hear, just how we can hold on to faith or hope or our own sense of what we want when things get tough. So here's the other side of the story. I have Suman, who is actually my college housemate. There were 9 of us living in a house, and Suman was one among 8 girls. And so we've all gotten to know each other very well. And Suman's here to talk to us about his life experiences and his journey into parenthood. And Suman, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Like you said, we are longtime friends back from college, and we've been close ever since. So here we are.
That's true.
Strong friendship.
A very close, decades-old friendship where we talk about anything and everything. And now we're doing it on record. Go us. So, Suman, you are about to become a dad of twins.
I am. Exciting. Terrified and excited at the same time. It's crazy. It's been a long journey, but they're due in September. We're still battling what the names are going to be. But one boy and one girl are on its way.
And when you say it's been a long journey, how long has it been?
So it's a debate. So my wife says it hasn't been as long as I think, but I think it's probably been since 2012 that we probably started trying. So we got married in 2009. And I think any Indian family, I think any family, but Indian families in particular, they're very methodical in terms of next phases. So you turn a certain age, your next phase is to get a job. After you turn a certain age, your next phase is to get married. After a certain phase, to have children. So, we're probably an odd couple being married nearly 10 years now and not having children till now.
You got to hit those milestones.
That's right.
You got to win everything.
That's right. Everything's a comparison.
So do your parents feel like you're winning more because you're having twins, or are they disappointed by the amount of time it's taken?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think they're happy that it's happening. I think it's probably disappointment that it took so long. I remember getting questions. It's like, hey, why haven't you had kids yet? And it's always like, yeah, we have been trying, right? So it's just a question where everyone's just wondering why, or is it taking so long, as opposed to, oh, what's going on? Is there something else? Most people thinking it was a voluntary choice as opposed to an involuntary choice.
What would it have meant if it were a voluntary choice?
I think there's still a stigma, right? I think we've even talked to our in-laws about this, but they're saying, folks that don't have kids, are they selfish? Are you selfish by not having kids? There's multiple ways to think about it, right? We adopted dogs, right? So I don't think we're very selfish people.
I can hear one in the background.
Yeah, that's right. I think the girl dog is barking about something. And then you think about what the options are, right? You could be a family of none, right? Just you and your wife. You could be a family with fur babies, which a lot of people choose to, which we have chosen. You could adopt, or you can do many other things, right? And so I think there's multiple ways to define a family. You sometimes have to conform to culture, but it's always, I think it should be your choice, but sometimes people don't understand those choices.
We were talking about the feeling that you may or may not have had around pressure as an Indian man.
Yeah, I think that's right, yeah.
So, I'm feeling that pressure too, and I'm a white woman. Do you think it's different in our cultures?
No, I think it's the same. I think it's a societal expectation to, the song goes, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby in a carriage, right? So if you don't find the love, something's wrong. If you don't find the marriage, something's wrong. If you don't find the baby in the carriage, something's wrong, right?
Something must be horribly wrong with me right
now.
Oh, horribly.
No. Well, that's what perception, I think, maybe. But I don't think that's necessarily true. So people have to get to know you, right? But I think folks see things the way they want to see things.
Okay, so 2012, arguably, although your wife says it might be a different time period. So that's 8 years of trying.
Yes.
8
years of trying.
8 years of trying, okay. Is it an intentional start, or clearly not if you guys disagree about when exactly it started?
Yeah, I think, you're like, hey, let's have a kid, right? So you stop contraception, you stop kind of the easy stuff first to see if it happens, right? And then age plays a factor. So she was 32 at the time. So, that age wasn't yet a factor. If you go down, you try a couple of years first. So we said, hey, we'll just, if it happens, if it happens, if it doesn't, it doesn't. And so you kind of roll the dice.
I got to witness several of the 8 years. I think early on you maybe were not communicating openly with your friends that this was an active trying situation. But I got to witness this meandering through a lot of the medical system as you worked towards understanding the situation and ultimately having a successful conception. So talk to me a little bit about that process.
Yeah. First of all, I feel terrible because it's all on the female. Like we don't, other than you maybe getting as a male, getting a test or two, and then of course you get all the pleasure of going in a cup, and that's really about it. And so, a normal course of business, watch some porn, go in a cup, and you're good to go. God forbid, in some cases, some men have to do more invasive procedures, but it's mostly on the woman, which is really unfortunate. So it's always, hey, taking my wife to the next appointment to figure out, is it this issue? Is it another issue? It becomes invasive. It becomes exhausting. Some procedures are painful, right? Depending on what you need to do. So the beginning, it's ultrasounds. It's not too bad, but then it progresses into, okay, do we need to do other type of procedures to check to make sure? Eventually it culminated for a big procedure for her in just terms of she had fibroids in there to get removed. And that's an extensive surgery. It's probably one of the more painful ones a female can go through because you're literally ripping tissue off of your uterus, right? And then you have a weaker uterus, so that means you're going to have a C-section. So at every point you're like, do I keep going? And you have to keep investing more and more. It's almost like a Ponzi scheme or dying business, right? Once you're this far, do you just keep going? Do you just keep going? At what point do you say stop, is enough enough? And I think that's where you could keep trying any procedure as many times as you want, right? You could exhaust your financial resources, or you could exhaust your emotional resources. It just depends on how far you personally want to go and then how far people are pushing you.
If you're thinking about this as a Ponzi scheme, this fertility business, do you see it as a financial Ponzi scheme or an emotional one?
Yeah, I think it's more emotional, right? Because once you're in it, like you just have to keep going. You start getting some return, and that return is hope, right? And there's this hope, like, hey, you try this one procedure, there's hope. Oh, here's the next procedure. Invest a little more, and there's more hope. And invest a little more and hope. Right, there's really two things in infertility.
It's like dangling a toy in front of a puppy or a cat or something, and like they're almost there. They've almost got it.
And it's probability, right? At the end of the day, it's math. They put your profile in to say how old are you, what your stats look like, and boom, there's a probability. And
Is there any surprise that you're in finance? Like
no.
To me, I think it's luck, and I think maybe there's the universe or something like that. And you're like, no, this is statistics. It's
statistics. I mean, there is some luck to it, right? So if you look at all the charts, you should try no more than 3 times because the probability just decreases if you're doing an IVF, right? And they suggest you can do IVF as much as you want, though. You could get it's like going to Vegas. You could play craps all day long. You could gamble all day long. You could hit it or you may not, but sometimes you have to walk away.
Yeah, is it like craps or is it like blackjack, right? Where the numbers are building and like statistically the next card's probably not going to be in your favor, but it could be, so you want to turn it over?
It's probably craps because you don't know, right? 'Cause blackjack, if you can count cards, you know what the probabilities are in your favor, right? So probably keep changing. No, I can't. I wish. I wouldn't be here talking to you if that's the case.
We wouldn't be friends. You'd be like some Uber.
I'd be a high roller playing blackjack. That's right.
So how many times did you hit the craps table? How many times did you guys go through the IVF process?
We did 3, just like the book says, right? You always have to follow the book.
Who wrote this book?
I don't know, but statistics say it's 3. I could be wrong, but they say it could be the internet. It could be a faulty article, but 3. After 3 doesn't try. Statistically, it doesn't matter as much.
Okay, so you try naturally for a while, then you have to go through some surgical procedures, including a very brutal fibroid surgery.
Yep. Not me. Clarify, it's not me.
What was it like as a partner watching your wife?
It's terrible. It's terrible. I wish I could burden at least half, right? I mean, any good spouse, husband, partner would want to at least minimize any pain experience for their significant other as much as they can.
Did you feel left out at all?
I do now, because I can't go to doctor appointments. I can't do anything.
Because of COVID?
Because of COVID.
Yeah. Okay, so your third IVF was the one that worked?
It's the one that worked. Twins. And in fact, I still remember what we did one try. We didn't actually get the first implantation. You do genetic testing. We're at more high risk. My wife's a little bit older. We ended up destroying the eggs because they're not viable for life. So nothing got implanted. We did the second one. We took eggs out and they put in sperm. Same thing happened, not compatible for life. So we actually ended up switching doctors. The first 2 tries, and I guess it doesn't really count because we never actually got to implantation.
Okay.
So I guess the second time we actually tried implantation. The first time it didn't work. So the first 2 where the eggs weren't viable for life, we don't count those as trials. So then we tried a new doctor. So we said, okay, probability is really like if you can put it in. And so this doctor actually said, don't try genetic testing, biology will take care of itself. So we actually tried once, didn't work. We tried this second time, it didn't work. And then we ended up putting in all the eggs in one basket, literally.
Just like shoved them all in there.
All in there for the last try. It was
How many were all the eggs? 3?
3 was remaining. Of the 3, 2 ended up surviving, or our future children.
And now you're weeks away from that moment.
Weeks away.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Okay, so 8 years, this very long journey, this very complicated process. And you said earlier on that the currency, the thing that you're playing for, the return is of hope, a return of hope, which I think is just such an interesting financial way to talk about emotions. Trust you to take emotions and boil them down to some sort of logarithmic, I don't even what do you call that?
I don't know. Rationalization?
I would say
maybe
over-rationalization. Okay, maybe. So you've got this hyper-rationalized return of hope, but I was witness as a friend to various points along the way, and it seemed like there were moments when the hope was starting to give out. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we gave up, I think. So the journey is not linear. It's actually very windy, right? At some point, you're like, I'm out, like tap me out, right? You walk away from the table. You go back. I don't know why I keep going back to
why do you keep going back?
Vegas, right?
Why do you keep going back to Vegas?
I don't know, but I think the biggest reason why, so we actually wanted to, it's expensive, right? And my philosophy is the same amount of investment that could be made to going into conceiving a child could have been made into helping a child.
So it wasn't so much 8 years continuous, this linear path. It sounds like 8 years of start, stop, get invested emotionally, and then draw back, give up hope, re-engage hope. So what helped you re-engage? How did you find your way back to this fertility process?
Yeah, I think, it's emotionally exhausting when you're trying for something to happen so hard. It's like, whether any part in your life, you want something so bad and it doesn't happen and it's devastating. You have to recharge, think about how much you really want it, and then guilt will happen, right? So we're okay, we're okay without a kid. We come to a compromise, and you'll see a young baby or a couple. And my wife was telling me this too. It's like the men always seem to want a baby more than female. This is a sample set of 1. I get it. This could be a bad sample size, but I think that's been true. So I think for me, as much as I was content, I was not as okay as she was if the prospect of us not having kids. So I was like, I would see a child or playing in the yard. I was like, oh man, I may never have that. And I think we talked about just walking down the aisle that you never get that. You'll see all your friends having their kids and getting married and having grandkids later and just missing out on all that. Are we going to be okay with that? And, no regrets. So it's an emotional roller coaster. I think you can come to terms with it. It's almost, you want to go somewhere, do something, or be in this career. And then you're like, that's okay. I'll just sidestep and I'll see what life takes me. But we have to try one more time.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say that you started extrapolating these moments down the road in your future, and you were not feeling okay with not participating in those or not having those for yourself.
Yeah, no, that's right. And then, seeing friends' kids, and they're like, oh, no one's ever going to call me dad. As much as I love my dogs, again, bark is not the same thing as a child talking. So
that's absolutely true. I think it's fascinating that your wife too felt that it was more gendered, that guys want babies more than girls, or that guys feel it differently.
I think so. I think they desire it more. Going back to that, I don't think they have to suffer through the pain as much. So it's easier to want something when, for a female, it's emotional, it's physical, it can be painful. There's a lot more involved. And so I think for a girl, you have to think about it and you're willing to walk away. I think maybe a little bit more easier. I could be wrong.
It certainly seems like it's an individual choice.
It is.
And you're saying really clearly that when you thought about it, when you did some deep reflection, the choice was clear that you really wanted to try again.
Yeah, we had to try. In fact, I still remember the very last one, because it was always failures. Like, what's the point? And then my wife was like, let's do it. And lo and behold, it was very close. We actually almost didn't put the last 3 in.
Were you guys always on the same page? Like, well, let's try, let's not try? Or were there ever moments of push-pull between the two of you?
The very last one that we're going to put in, I said, let's just stop. Because the injection and prep work is not great either. Painful, especially for females, with all the injections they have to go through, all the prep work you have to go through. It's not just extract and reinsert, right? There's injections, there's investment, emotional investment.
It's a lot. Yes,
it's a lot. And she couldn't sit in a chair for hours because, you have to use it in a muscular tissue, which is typically your butt. And they have to do multiple times a day. And then you have to do oral drugs, injection drugs. So it was tough.
So it was empathy for your wife that made you more reluctant to move forward with the last one, or was it burnout, just emotional burnout?
I think it was both. I just, we tried, could you keep trying? Absolutely. I think I saw the pain she was going through and I was just like, no more, let's just stop it. And then, I don't want to keep guessing, is it going to happen? Is it not? Because at some point you want to rip the Band-Aid and say, this is your life. It's fantastic. We can move on and we can make the best of it with what we have without kids, if that were the case.
If that were the case. And luckily it worked out. The last one worked out for you.
Yes. Well, we'll find out. 2 more weeks.
2 more weeks and then you become a dad. What was your vision for the family?
Yeah, I thought about, and in fact, we thought of only 1. 2 is a great surprise, but we thought about, walking, like our friends having kids and then them being able to walk their son or daughter down the aisle. That's all that stuff that you'll just miss out on later in life or potentially, right? And to say
those
that
Indian milestones again.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I want my own grandkids now,
You want to pressure your kids to get married and go to college and have kids of their own.
That's right. And make sure they're doctors, right? Isn't that the Indian dream?
Right.
Right. So, I think if we didn't fully try and exhaust, the eggs that we had all available to us and everything, I think we would just regret it. So it's to make sure, we just want to make sure we had no regrets.
Okay. So your family building journey involved hope, fear around losing out on this opportunity, regret possibly. What else was there?
You still got the whole, we would be one of the very few in our family circle without kids, right? My wife's sister has kids. My brother doesn't have any kids, but then there's the entire, extended family members that all have kids, right? And then you'd be the odd duckling out. There's part of that stigma that was still there. I mean, if it was completely, we couldn't have kids, it would have been fine. We were okay with it, but could we just keep trying to make sure that we could be okay with it?
And the answer was no.
Yeah, we had to try. We had to try. In fact, I still remember the very last one, because it was always failures. Like, what's the point? And then my wife was like, let's do it. And lo and behold, it was very close. We actually almost didn't put the last 3 in.
So Suman, let me ask you this question. What other things did you guys consider in your fertility journey? You said you talked about adoption a little bit, both local and international. And you said that you talked about just not having kids and giving up, and being the family that travels a lot and has a lot of fun. Were there other things that you considered? Did you consider surrogacy or anything like that?
Yeah, well, clearly you look at all options, right? You could go surrogacy. You could do a U.S. surrogacy. In fact, I think you can do it in Canada for significantly cheaper because infertility is covered. So you could hire someone in Canada and it's a lot cheaper. I mean, at that point, I guess we've talked about this before, we rather would have given that money for someone who's less fortunate as opposed to going through more. It sounds very hypocritical, right? Because we did spend a significant amount of money, but not as much as a surrogate would have cost, right? You're talking about $100,000 versus $30,000, $40,000.
Tremendous amount of.
There's a big step up function. And so we even felt hesitant, right? And if we were able to align on an ethnicity to adopt a child, I think we would have adopted a child. It's possible that we may not have gotten one because the wait lists and forever they could be long, depending on how a child was given up, that the parent may have not chosen us. That's always an option. But we would have probably been more on a wait list. For whatever reason, right or wrong, we wanted to adopt. We looked into adopting an Indian child, and we found out it was way more difficult than we ever thought.
What was difficult about it?
I think getting an Indian child in America, putting in the wait list it's rare, right? There's not many that come up for adoption or ready for adoption. And then two, adopting one from India became very difficult, right? There's a long convoluted wait system. So there are requirements and what you have to do. You have to go live in India for a certain amount of time. It just became very onerous. We actually ended up donating money to various children's organizations. Save the Children's one of them. And so we're like, let's just go with that. And then we started are we going to regret not having our own kid in some shape or form? And so that's when we re-triggered the trying. So it wasn't 8 years of trying. As we tried, we just let it go. And then we're like, okay, well, maybe we should just try before, you turn 40. Because after turning 40, it's all probability. It's just, It becomes significantly near impossible.
So let's go back to the adoption thing for a second, because you underscored, or you said very clearly that it had to be an Indian child. Why was that important to you?
I think culturally, there is differing opinions as to what type of ethnicity we could adopt or fully embrace. I was open to most ethnicities. I don't think it really matters. I think, my wife had some concerns, but not too many concerns, but it was more about the family units and how they'd react, right? You have to worry about what your parents may think, what society may think. Everyone has conceptions or ideas and unconscious biases, if you want to call them biases, if you want to call it, and that they could manifest themselves. You don't want a child to react or notice that too. I've heard horror stories of minority folks adopting white children and being like, oh, are you the nanny? I think there's a lot of complexities to raising someone that's not your ethnicity. And I'm not saying that it's not impossible. It's very possible to do so. And it's great on the people that do it. Very supportive and happy for that. That's an option for a lot of folks. I just think for us, it wasn't going to be just because of the complexity we had with our just family background.
Being out with your child and somebody asks you if you're the nanny or the Manny in your case.
And I've heard, Manny. I'd love to be a Manny, but
it was incredible Manny, actually.
More a house husband is more my thing.
You're basically working towards that right now, incrementally.
I asked my wife to quit. She said, hell no.
If you could quit.
If I could quit, yes.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
And what would you do? How would you spend your time?
Taking care of the kids, cooking, cleaning, working on my dad bod. I'm halfway there. We're
halfway
good.
There?
Yeah.
All right.
I got to get a double dad bod with twins.
What the hell is a double dad bod?
I don't know.
That's one, get one.
A lot of eating crap.
Like extra paunch?
Good. Yeah, extra paunch. Yep.
Yeah.
Man boobs, the whole 9 yards.
Every man's dream.
That's right. It's my wife's dream, I'll tell you. Nope. I almost wish that we did complete adoption just because it would have been the right thing to do. It would have been a good thing to do.
Would you ever consider it now, after the kids get to a certain age?
No, I don't think. I think what we've switched to is, instead of actually adopting a kid, it'll be more monetary support for other group, right? Whether it's an organization that's just out there to help charities. You
had said adopting would have been the right thing to do.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
Well, to complete it, right? I think we got cold feet, and I'm the person. I always feel like if you could make it work, you should take care of another human being wherever possible, right? Just saying we should have just completed it. Instead of just calling a few agencies instead of doing, call it a half-ass effort. Like we should have gone more full out. We should have put the deposit down instead of just inquiring. We should have let the motions go through, and we didn't do any of that. I think we were just afraid, right? Because they're
afraid of what?
What adoption would mean in terms of, like what would the family think? What would other people think? How do you raise a child that's adopted? Do you tell them? Do you don't? We couldn't align on that one. I was a firm believer you should tell your child. She was not.
That's interesting. So there's a number of parenting decisions that were embedded in adoption that you guys
we couldn't align
discussions around, but maybe didn't couldn't get interesting. What were some of the other ones? So telling your kid that they're adopted, the ethnicity of the kid, other points of reflection, not necessarily disagreement, but those moments where you thought, okay, I've got to really think about what this means for me.
Yeah, I mean, we were open to a younger newborn, right? But then how do you explain no pregnancy pictures? What would we say? We lost them all? Like, I don't know. What do if there's no pictures with grandparents early on, like how do you explain all that stuff? Right? To me, you had to tell me you're adopted. Or, if you waited 5 years or 6 years, however long, you say, okay, yeah, I'll tell you, but when you're older. And that was an option too. And what kind of mental scarring does that happen on a child? Even if you tell them like the day they're 1 or 2, right? Do you forever change that bond? It was complicated. And I think when you're a parent, you both have to operate and be aligned. And when you're not, it's going to create issues not for yourself, but for your kids too. And if we couldn't get aligned on everything, and as you're gonna disagree with things, but you're going to be responsible for them. And while you adopt them, you effectively make them your child and love them as your own child. You could inadvertently do something that may not be the best in their interest, right? And that's where I was terrified. Like, what if they were better off with another foster parent, another adoptive parent than us?
So you started to have fear and doubt and questioning your own parenting abilities.
Like, would we be good parents to that child?
So you have fears around how to parent?
No.
Or fears around making mistakes?
Yes, making mistakes, because I think there's just much more responsibility on your shoulders. I mean, you should be. You have to be much more thoughtful about, I think. I mean, you always have to be thoughtful, but I think you need to be extra thoughtful when it's especially a child that you're going to take into your own arms.
So it's almost either extreme fear or extreme consideration that you chose not to adopt.
Both. I don't know if someone would say I'm considerate for not doing it. They may call me chicken for not going through with it, which is, it's possible.
Okay. So aside from having the perfect body for your wife, tell me a little bit more about your vision for parenthood and how you're expecting to parent twins, because you're not just having the two at the same time. When you've spent 8 years traveling the world and doing all sorts of incredible things with your life, now you're going to have 2 small children. How does that feel?
Yeah, so I'm probably ill-prepared, but this sounds terrible, but I'm going to wing it. And
like this podcast.
Exactly. We're going to wing it. This is going to sound really bad, but I know my parents are going to come. There's a support unit there. You can Google your way through sticky situations. You have to change a diaper, feed them, poop them, take care of them, bathe them. We get it. I think there is a natural instinct, right? Otherwise, we as humans couldn't survive without a natural instinct about how to take care of children. But I'm excited. It'll be a fun road. But part of our approach too is that we'll love our kids. We'll do everything we can, but we'll make sure they don't change our lifestyle significantly wherever possible, right? Clearly, you have to feed them 2 kids every hour. In the very short term, it's going to be all about them. Once they get their shots and they're feeling that they can go out and socialize in the world, hopefully COVID is quieter, we'll take them to the restaurants. Why not? So we'll travel with them. We'll keep going as much as it's possible.
I love this vision of you as the Manny for 2 twins, living your daily life, traveling around the world globally with them. And I think I'm going to play this part of the podcast back to you in a couple of years and ask you how it's going.
I will.
Because I imagine it's going to be hard.
Yes, it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy. I mean, people may give you looks while you're taking a young child to a restaurant. I'm guilty of it. I've seen the crying baby, and you're like, you shut that kid up. But you know what? I'm probably going to be one of those people. We're called dinks.
Okay, dinks. Okay. Dinks,
double income, no kids. Yeah. We're dinks.
Okay.
Well,
So you're going to go from being a double income, no kids snob who's seeing other people at restaurants with their kids going, ew, shut them up, to somebody who brings twins everywhere you go.
yep. It's called karma.
I love you. I love you so much. I'm so excited to see karma hit you.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah. All right.
On the plane, on the train, wherever we go.
Okay, so your vision for family includes kids who are hypermobile and go where you go.
This is a vision. This may not be the reality.
Looking back on the past 8 years, and it's been a tough 8 years, what do you wish you could have told yourself along the way that you now know?
Start earlier, right? I think we waited 3-4 years to get started.
So one of the questions I love to ask at the end of every podcast episode is, what is your definition of family? And can you answer that in a couple of words?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think no family is the same. I think all families are unique. When I was growing up, I grew up with an Indian heritage, and I always saw a white family and their dynamics are much different than an Indian family. And then I think the dynamics that we're going to bring our kids are going to be much different than my parents brought up in. And I think a family is what you make it and how much you want to invest in it, right? So I've seen, my parents, their view of family was, provide education, food, and shelter, right? It's a very kind of nature type definition, where other cultures are much more loving. And somewhere in between, I think, is where family lies. You're never going to love your family all the time, but they're always going to be your family, right? Family can be defined of whatever you make of it. It's your kids, it could be adopted kids, it could be your pets. But I think what makes a family is that it's a bond that can't be broken. You're attached to them somehow, somewhere, all the time. It's something that you can never let go of or never want to let go of.
So if I'm going to paraphrase you and restate it in a short sentence, you're saying that family is unbreakable.
Yes, 100%. Whatever is unbreakable in your life is part of your family.
I like that. I know I gave you the word unbreakable, but I kind of like it.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. Like my dog. Everyone puts their animal, it can be even small things, right? Even a really close friend could be part of your family, because having that bond is just unbreakable. And even though you're not blood related, if you ever lost them or lost that friendship, it'd be unbearable to someone.
Absolutely. I definitely have witnessed that.
Yep. Like you.
Like you.
Yes.
That's true. A good friend, an unbreakable family bond friendship is one where you say, hey, I'm starting this podcast and will you please be on it? And
that's right.
Says, yeah.
Yep. You can hate them and love them all at the same time.
Yeah. Oh, I hope there's no hatred right now.
No, absolutely not.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So for any of our listeners who are going through something similar, or for me, do you have any advice that you've gleaned from the past 8 years of trying and going through that emotional roller coaster?
Yeah. People are going to say different things. Don't listen to anyone but yourself. And I think that's what's the most important thing. You got to do what's going to make you happy. People will judge you. People will make comments. People will support you. People will say, why are you doing that? You have to do what's going to make you happy. You could keep going forever, but I think you need to also draw a line and saying, this is enough's enough. Here's where I draw the line. And I know I moved my line once or twice, but I think you have to at some point say, this is it. I'm okay. We're all very fortunate, and you move on, right? So I think it's very tough for people to kind of walk away from things. I know it's when someone's so emotionally invested, right?
Yeah.
If you're, I'll close this out with gambling. But yeah, you can gamble, and technically you're supposed to gamble and you have to beat the odds and you'll have to go through time. But if you're down $1 million, you need to walk away, right? It's the same concept. If you're down emotionally, if you're down financially, the investment in the journey is just too difficult. Just walk away.
Just walk away.
Easier said than done.
And yet, you wanted to walk away, and had you been the one to walk away, had she not encouraged you to stay engaged in the process, you wouldn't be expecting twins in 2 weeks.
That's true. She had a different line. So sometimes your lines may not converge, but you both individually, depending on the couple is trying, should have your own lines.
That's excellent.
Right.
Is there anything else you want to say to us today before we close out?
I think, everyone's journey is unique, but don't be afraid to explore everything, right? You don't know what you don't know. I know it's cliche to say that, but you got to try everything before you can say, no, it's not enough, within limitation. And don't feel guilty for saying no to something. Call it fear of missing out. And I think that's what I saw the kids on the street saying I could miss out, but then it's okay if you miss out because there's a different path for you where you're going to get a lot more things that someone else may not have, right? If a child is not there for you, there could be something else that's there for your relationship, a pet, a friend, whatever it may be. So no two things, no situations are unique, and don't worry about missing out.
No two things, no two situations are comparable.
Sorry, they're all unique. Correct.
Well, this is wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today, Suman.
You're welcome. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, it's been so fun. It's fun to see the side of you.
It is.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, later.
Thank you for listening to Stork'd with your host, Julia Carroll. This podcast is changing the conversation around the ways people define and create family. For more information, visit storkedpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter. And while you're there, leave us a message describing what a modern family means to you. That's STORKD podcast.com.